This footage captures a 22-year-old woman from Sungai Raya, Indonesia, running on a treadmill at a local gym on the afternoon of June 18, 2024. Her workout had been intense, and after nearly 30 minutes, she began to slow down, reaching for a towel to wipe the sweat from her face. But suddenly she lost her balance and stumbled forward, and what she didn't see was the wide-open window directly behind her treadmill. In an instant, the young woman plummeted 3 stories, crashing headfirst onto the pavement of Jalan Perit Hussein below. And despite being taken to the hospital, she sadly passed away shortly after arrival. This is just one of 8 shocking gym-related accidents we'll cover today, each more devastating, tragic, and bizarre than the last. But first, as always, viewer discretion is advised. On October 16, 2024, 21-year-old medical student Mohammed Faraj arrived at the University of East Anglia's Sports Park gym in Norwich for an evening workout. It was around 7 p.m. when he began setting up for one of his regular exercises, standing calf raises using a Smith machine. To increase his range of motion, Mohammed placed a standard plastic aerobic step beneath the bar. He then loaded the machine with a 15-kilogram bar and 2 25-kilogram plates, bringing the total weight to 65 kilograms. Meanwhile, the safety catches on the Smith machine had been left at their lowest setting by a previous user performing a different exercise. Yet Mohammed didn't readjust them before starting. He simply stepped onto the platform, positioned the bar across his shoulders, and began his first few reps. But partway through the set, the aerobic step tipped beneath his feet. In an instant, Mohammed lost his balance and slipped backward, with the bar falling directly onto the back of his head and neck. Just a few meters away, 2 other gym-goers, Dr. Trey Koev and consultant anesthetist Dr. Damian Laba, turned at the sound of a loud crash. They saw Mohammed briefly try to stand before collapsing, with the blood coming from his nose and mouth. Dr. Laba immediately shouted for help and began CPR, assisted by staff from the gym's reception. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but his injuries were far too severe. A catastrophic damage to the upper spine and traumatic brain injury. So unfortunately, Mohammed Faraj was pronounced dead at the scene. This tragedy caused deep shock and sorrow throughout the entire sports park gym community. Following an investigation, the facility added new signage to the Smith machine, warning users always to check and adjust the safety stops before each use. But by then, nothing could bring Mohammed back. Through tears, his father, Hashim Faraj, later described his son as someone who loved life, a devoted athlete and a kind soul whose future had only just begun, yet was tragically cut short far too soon. Meanwhile, the next case is even more disturbing, because the weight involved wasn't just 65 kilograms, but nearly twice as much. At 22 years old, Kyle Thompson was known at Iowa State University as the athletic guy in his circle. At East High School in Pleasant Hill, he had led his football team with both strength and heart. And even years after graduation, coaches still described him as a natural leader with a rare ability to inspire others to be their best. By the time he entered college, weight training had become a core part of his routine. So on the morning of December 26, 2016, Kyle walked into the Elite Edge Transformation Center in Ankeny, Iowa, for what appeared to be just another workout. He loaded the bar for a set of bench press, 143 kilograms, a weight he had successfully lifted many times before. Spotters stood nearby watching as he lay back on the bench and gripped the bar. However, in one terrible, split second, something went incredibly wrong. As Kyle pressed the bar upward, it suddenly slipped from his hands, and before anyone could react, the full weight dropped straight onto his neck, hitting with devastating force. Kyle lost consciousness instantly. Spotters and gym staff rushed to his side, and emergency services were called within moments to transport him to a hospital in Des Moines. But unfortunately, the trauma to his neck and airway was far too severe, and despite every attempt to save Kyle Thompson, doctors couldn't bring him back. News of his passing shattered his community. Former teammates, classmates, coaches, and friends flooded social media with tributes, remembering Kyle as the guy with a light-up-the-room smile. So even though investigations later confirmed that the gym had followed all required safety protocols, this truly freak and unforeseeable accident left a deep mark on everyone who knew Kyle Thompson. However, the most shocking gym-related tragedies aren't always tied to heavy weights. Sometimes, even cardio can turn unexpectedly deadly in ways no one could ever see coming. On the morning of July 18, 2023, 24-year-old Saksham Pruthi walked into Gymplex Fitness Zone in New Delhi for his usual morning workout. A tech graduate working in Gurugram, Saksham was known among friends and colleagues as a quiet, dedicated guy, someone who cared about his health and hit the gym regularly. That day was no different. Around 7 a.m., he arrived as usual, had a quick apple for breakfast, and hopped onto the treadmill after finishing his run. Saksham sat down to rest, reportedly between two treadmills, casually chatting with nearby gym-goers. But just a few minutes later, he suddenly collapsed. Witnesses said his body jolted and locked up, and before anyone could process what was happening, he lay motionless on the floor. One man, Keshav, rushed to help, but the moment he touched Saksham, he too was violently shocked and briefly blacked out. And that's when everything became terrifyingly clear. Neither man had fainted. They had both been electrocuted. Panicked gym members scrambled to cut the power, then began CPR and resuscitation attempts while calling 911. Fortunately, Keshav regained consciousness within minutes, but Saksham was far less lucky. Paramedics rushed him to Babasaheb Ambedkar Hospital, with visible electrical burns on his back and legs. Yet sadly, even emergency care couldn't save him. But how could something like this even happen? As it turned out, multiple gym members had already complained that the treadmills were giving off electrical shocks in the day leading up to the incident. However, those warnings were ignored, and the worst-case scenario struck with Saksham. Having just finished his run, sat between two faulty machines with an active electrical current running through their frames. The moment his sweat-damp body came into contact with the electrical surface, the current surged through him. In the aftermath, Gymplex Fitness Zone was immediately shut down, and Saksham's devastated family, including his father, Mahesh Kumar, demanded justice, and eventually they got it. On the very same day, the gym's owner, Anubhav Degal, was arrested and charged with criminal negligence and culpable homicide for actions that cost a healthy, innocent young man his life. Yet as grim as this tragedy was, the next man also fell victim to the staff's complete carelessness, and his final moments were even more agonizing. It was the morning of March 15, 2020, when staff at the Greensburg YMCA in Pennsylvania arrived to prepare the facility for the day. But as they opened the steam room door in the men's locker area, they were met with a truly horrifying sight. Lying lifeless on the bench was 80-year-old David W. Robinson, a longtime YMCA member and respected attorney in the local community. As it turned out, David had visited the facility the evening before, just as he often did, for a routine steam after his swim. Security logs confirmed he had scanned into the building at around 5:45 p.m. and made his way to the sauna. But what happened next was the result of pure, catastrophic oversight. At 7 p.m., the YMCA closed for the night. Despite multiple announcements over the intercom, no one performed a final check of the locker zone or the steam room. Staff simply locked up and left, completely unaware that David was still inside. Meanwhile, the steam room remained on until 10:30 p.m., maintaining a sweltering temperature of at least 44 degrees Celsius. But even after it shut off, the enclosed space retained extreme heat for hours. Worse yet, the room itself lacked a panic button, an intercom, and even an interior handle. The door simply couldn't be opened from the inside. Therefore, David Robinson had no way out. Trapped for the entire night, he endured a slow, torturous death from prolonged heat exposure. Yet despite the circumstances, the coroner listed the cause of death as natural causes, claiming David had passed away even before becoming trapped. But his widow, Colleen Robinson, and their 4 sons strongly disagreed and filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the YMCA and its CEO. Together with their attorney, Robert F. Daly, the family argued that David's death wasn't a medical episode. It was preventable negligence. Had the staff checked the steam room before closing, or had there been even a single emergency feature inside, David might have survived. Still, in the end, the case was settled without criminal charges, and the YMCA did not admit fault. Thus, the family never truly received justice for the negligence that left David with no chance of escape from that suffocating, oven-like trap. Yet sometimes, it isn't the heat you need to fear, because after the next case, you may never look at public swimming pools the same way again. The DoubleTree by Hilton Houston Brook Hollow is known for its upscale amenities, sleek fitness rooms, large event halls, and multiple swimming pools, including an outdoor lazy river designed for families to unwind. But on the afternoon of March 23, 2024, inside one of those same pools, something truly horrific was about to happen. That day, 8-year-old Alaya Lynette Jaco was at the hotel with her family, her mother, younger sister, and cousins. Enjoying a casual swim during a weekend outing, Alaya was an avid swimmer who adored the water, and the pool had been chosen specifically for her. At around 4:50 p.m., she was floating near a section of the lazy river when, suddenly, she vanished. The moment her family noticed the girl was missing, they went into a state of sheer panic. Alaya's mother searched the pool, called out her name, and combed through the surrounding deck. For nearly an hour, no one could figure out what had happened. At first, hotel staff refused to release surveillance footage until police arrived, but eventually, once Texas EcuSearch and emergency responders got involved, the truth finally emerged, and it was every parent's worst nightmare. It turned out that Alaya had been violently sucked into a large return pipe deep in the lazy river's circulation system, a pipe that, due to a malfunction, had reversed flow and was pulling water inward with enormous force. Normally, it was supposed to be capped. However, that day it wasn't. Rescue teams drained the entire pool, inserted underwater cameras, and spent over 13 hours trying to locate the little girl. At around 6 a.m. the following morning, they finally found Alaya's body over 6 meters inside the pipe, wedged in so tightly that crews had to cut through concrete and metal to retrieve her. But by then, little Alaya had already suffocated while trapped inside the pipe, unable to scream, move, or escape. In the days that followed, the hotel pool was immediately shut down, and the city's health department cited multiple code violations, including dangerous suction levels, faulty electrical wiring, and the lack of a mandatory protective grate over the return line. Alaya's mother, Jose Daniela Jaco Omada, later filed a wrongful death lawsuit seeking over $1 million in damages. She stated, "Everybody knows this could have been avoided." Her attorney emphasized that the hotel failed on every level, from ignored maintenance to denying the family access to camera footage in the crucial first minutes after Alaya disappeared. Yet more than a year later, the lawsuit is still ongoing. And while no criminal charges have been filed so far, we now move to an even more unexpected case, where the victims were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time during an ordinary workout. It was still early, just after 6 a.m. on September 22, 2015. And the Lifestyle RX gym in Livermore, California was already buzzing with energy. Dozens of people were in motion, some lifting weights, others pacing through their cardio. And in one corner, a TRX group class was in full swing, with athletes pulling and pushing through suspension routines under the guidance of an instructor. Among them was 49-year-old Catherine Baker, a senior executive at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Known to colleagues as sharp, warm, and highly respected, she was mid-rep in her workout routine when the unthinkable happened. At exactly 6:26 a.m., a sudden explosion shattered the calm. A white Mercedes SUV had plowed straight through the gym's front glass doors. The vehicle tore across the floor at full speed, traveling nearly 21 meters through the building before slamming directly into the group fitness class. Pandemonium erupted as people screamed, dove for cover, and were thrown across the room. At the center of the chaos was Kathy Baker, struck head-on by the SUV's front bumper and hit the ground with immense force. 6 women nearby were also injured, but Kathy bore the brunt of the impact. First responders arrived within minutes and rushed the victims to the hospital, while the others escaped with only moderate injuries. Kathy suffered severe blunt force trauma and, unfortunately, did not survive. Meanwhile, behind the wheel of the SUV was an 80-year-old woman named Miniko Deacon, who had mistaken the accelerator for the brake while attempting to park. It was a textbook case of pedal confusion, a common phenomenon among elderly drivers where, in a moment of disorientation, the gas pedal is pressed instead of the brake. Eventually, the case was forwarded to the district attorney for potential negligence charges. But in the end, no criminal action was taken, and Kathy's death was officially ruled a tragic accident. Meanwhile, the final case we'll cover today is truly unique, likely one of the only gym-related incidents of its kind, and its ending is no less disturbing. On the afternoon of November 8, 2024, 39-year-old Derek Sink walked into the Planet Fitness on Hardigan Street in Indianapolis. According to staff records, the man appeared agitated, jittery, and unfocused, pacing slightly as he spoke. Still, he signed up for a new membership at the front desk while his girlfriend and her daughter went shopping at the nearby TJ Maxx, expecting to pick him up shortly afterward. As part of his new membership perks, Derek requested to use the tanning facilities. A staff member assigned him a private tanning room, and at approximately 4 p.m., He entered and shut the door behind him. At that moment, no one realized that it would be the last time anyone ever saw him alive. When his girlfriend returned to the gym a short time later, Derek was nowhere to be found. His car was still in the parking lot, with the keys remaining inside, yet there was no sign of him leaving, and all the calls and messages went unanswered. At first, she assumed he had stepped out or caught a ride with someone, but as hours passed, concern slowly gave way to fear. By the next day, Derek's family began calling local hospitals, police, and Planet Fitness itself. November 10th, they officially filed a missing person report and once again returned to the gym demanding answers. But the staff repeatedly reassured them that all rooms had been cleaned and checked and insisted that Derek was not inside the building. Yet exactly 1 day later, the mystery behind the disappearance finally came out. On the afternoon of November 11th, just 3 full days after Derek had entered the tanning room, a gym patron alerted employees to a strong, foul odor coming from one of the booths. The staff opened the room, and inside, they discovered Derek Sink's body, lying motionless in the closed tanning bed, unresponsive, cold, and already in an advanced state of decomposition. As it turned out, Derek Sink was on probation for past drug-related offenses and had a long history of substance abuse struggles, including previous arrests for possession. He had even been wearing an ankle monitor at the time of his death, which ironically helped pinpoint his last known location. So when police and the coroner arrived at the scene, they found a used syringe and drug paraphernalia next to Derek's body, and toxicology reports later confirmed what had been grimly clear. Derek had overdosed on fentanyl, dying within hours of entering the tanning room on November 8th. But perhaps the most disturbing question of all is, how could his body remain inside a small tanning booth for over 72 hours without anyone noticing? The answer was appalling. Despite what they told the family, staff later admitted they had never checked the tanning booth. Cleaning protocols were ignored, and no one even noticed the smell until it filled the hallway. A horrifying oversight, and a tragedy that could have been discovered days earlier had someone simply opened the door. And yet, Planet Fitness avoided all criminal charges. Despite widespread criticism, no one from management or staff was held legally responsible for the failure to check the room or respond to the family's requests. Derek's girlfriend, 41-year-old Heather Bradford, however, wasn't so fortunate. She was later arrested and charged for allegedly supplying that same fentanyl that led to his overdose and death, bringing to a close the case that was as strange as it was tragic. Gym, fitness centers, swimming pools, saunas. We usually think of them as places to get stronger, healthier, maybe even relax while doing something good for our bodies. But after the cases we've seen today, it's hard to look at all those spaces the same way again. Now let me ask you, have you ever had a moment at the gym that made your skin crawl? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking real-life stories that might just tempt you to grab a burger instead of stepping into a room full of deadly machines.